Good evening. Welcome to devotional number 62, if memory serves correctly. We are beginning our third month of quarantine devotionals. Tonight we are on Matthew chapter 1, verses 33 through 46. We're looking at the parable of the tenants as we continue to jaunt through the Gospel of Matthew, looking at the parables that Jesus told. Listen to another parable, it begins. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it, dug a winepress in it, and built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and moved to another place. When the harvest time approached, he sent his servants to the tenants to collect his fruit. The tenants seized his servants. They beat one, killed another, and stoned a third. Then he sent other servants to them more than the first time, and the tenants treated them the same way. Last of all, he sent his son to them. They will respect my son, he said. But when the tenants saw the son, they said to each other, "This is the heir. Come, let's kill him and take his inheritance." So they took him and threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants? "He'll bring those wretches to a wretched end," they replied, "and he'll rent the vineyard to other tenants who will give him his share of the crop at harvest time." Jesus said to them, "Have you never read in the scriptures? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. Anyone who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. Anyone on whom it falls will be crushed." When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard Jesus' parables, they knew he was talking about them, so they weren't completely dense. They looked for a way to arrest him, but they were afraid of the crowd because the people held that he was a prophet. Sounds a lot like politicians. Anyway, this parable begins with the setting of a vineyard, and it's perfectly normal for that time and place. The owner of the property plants a vineyard. He puts a wall around it, as was common. He dug a wine press in it, which makes perfect sense for a vineyard, and built a watchtower. This too was standard practice. In fact, this harkens back to the very Jewish thought of a garden as being a walled, protected location where there is a source of water, and then there's a watchtower put at the gate entrance to it. This harkens back to the Garden of Eden, where there was an angel stationed as a guard at the wall protecting the garden. So anyway, there's nothing alarming or upsetting about this parable to start with for the first century Jewish mind. Some guy owns property, he invests labor and capital and makes it into a vineyard with all the appurtenances thereto. And then he rents it out, as was his perfect pleasure. I mean, he could do what he wanted to with it. It was his. The alarming thing is the way the tenants reacted. It mind-bogglingly alarming. It's jarring, in fact. And so that's the way it's said. It's intentionally set up that way. It's a contrast of the normal and the abnormal. The lack of respect for property rights, the lack of respect for somebody who's giving you an opportunity that you did not earn. And hearkening back to the covenant God had made with his people, the nation of Israel, when he gave them a country in which he gave them vineyards they had not planted, buildings they had not built. And he said that it was his, and they were his tenants. And so they were not to move a boundary stone or to dispossess a family of its inheritance, because it didn't belong to them, it was God's. The tenants killed the servants who were the messengers to collect what was due as the percentage cut of the landowner. Perfectly normal. No reason to expect any foul play. This is the standard contractual arrangement for somebody who was sharecropping out a vineyard. The tenants were atrociously evil, ungrateful, murderous. And Jesus says to the Pharisees and the chief priests, that's you. And they knew it. Oh, they knew it, but couldn't do anything about it because they were terrified of the crowds who flocked to Christ and made him influential and therefore powerful. It wasn't until he had turned the crowds away that the Pharisees and the chief priests and the scribes had enough chutzpah to do anything about him. Have you never read in the scriptures, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? He's referring to himself. You see, God had sent the prophets to the nation of Israel time after time after time to receive from the people of Israel God's due, holy lives, living in accordance with God's law and God's rule. He warned them repeatedly. He chastised them repeatedly. And then he sent his son, as the author of Hebrews speaks about. And Jesus prophetically in this parable states that they grab the son and kill him outside of the vineyard. And so they take him outside of the gates of Jerusalem and crucify him on Mount Golgotha, the sanitary landfill for the city of Jerusalem. And the kingdom of God is taken from them. And it's given to those who will bear its fruit. Now you could say it's given to the Gentiles, and in some ways that comes to pass. But you must remember that the early church in Jerusalem was comprised completely of Jews. And there were about 75,000 of them or more, depending upon which scholars you reference. There was a massive church, the early church, the book of Acts, and it was almost completely Jew. So it wasn't Jew versus Gentile in this passage. It was taking it from the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the teachers and the scribes of the law and all those who followed the letter of the law but didn't have the love of God in their hearts, who did not pursue holiness as an end or a goal, but rather pursued power and influence, using religion as a lever for it. We still see this today. Pastors jump all over social media, either praising Trump as if he's the next Messiah or decrying him as though he's Satan. And I'm not exaggerating. I saw pastors post the other day calling him Satan. God desires that his people would be righteous. And he desires that the leaders of the church would be calling his people to righteousness, to holiness. Are politics important? Sure. That's why I'm in the political party of Team Jesus. I hope that you have had a wonderful day. I hope that you've enjoyed the sunshine, gotten out and done some gardening. I have, since last I spoke with you. I got some blueberry bushes in the ground, ripped out a dead lilac, planted some lettuce, and did some other various and sundries around the yard. And I have to tell you, sunshine is a beautiful, beautiful medication for the quarantine blues. Get out and enjoy some the next time you have some. You've missed it. Today, you'll have to wait a couple of days until there's more sun, it looks like, according to the weather forecast. That being said, when you're outside, realize you're supposed to be building the kingdom of God. And that begins with how you live your life, the words you speak, the way you love your neighbor as yourself, and the way you bless those who curse you, and love even your political enemies, in deed as well as in word. May our God bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may you begin to live out his reign here on the earth as it already is in heaven. Join me on the political party of Team Jesus. Thank you and good night.